Howdy, y'all. How's everyone doing today? Yeah, I hear some shouts, exactly. So I would love to see a show of hands. Who is responsible for implementing security within your organization? Nice.
Right on.
All right, cool. And then who has faced challenges trying to get your teammates to have a security-first mindset? Okay, almost everyone, great. So we're here today to talk about some of our customers that we hear common challenges where they're having a hard time implementing security culture within their organization. And this can happen with a range of different aspects, whether they don't have enough security architects to scale out their security, or they're implementing different aspects where the cloud skills might not be there. And so what we're going to talk about today are some practical strategies for you to implement and empower your builders to create a more sustainable security culture. This is Hart Rossman. He's the VP of AWS Global Services Security, and my name's Sarah Curry, and I'm the Organizational Excellence Leader for GSS. So what are we going to talk about today? We have a roadmap that we're going to walk you through, but we're essentially focusing on security leadership with a focus of inclusivity and empathy, and how bringing that to your teams is going to help empower you all to better create security champions within your team. So this is the agenda that we have today. It is a 200-level talk, mainly focusing on leadership, so we won't be going into any code demos today, but we're excited to give some actual tangible takeaways for you all. So here is our security culture roadmap. These are the aspects that we'll be focusing on today. So Hart will be telling some stories about how we embed security into the business by briefing the board and making sure that all of our different teams within our organization understand the critical aspects of security and why it should be everyone's top priority. I'll be talking a little bit about the foundations of psychological safety and how you can really earn trust with your builders so that they want to come to you as a Sherpa through their security experience so that they can better champion security risk and compliance. We'll also be talking about how can we positively reinforce escalation so that your team is more apt to escalate any types of concerns or great ideas that they have. And then empowering builders as security champions, because sometimes it's hard to find different security builders. So how can you help empower people that have security-first mindset to work with their product teams to better implement security earlier on? But first, I would love to flash back to 2020. I think you all probably remember the year. It was a hard one for most of us. So I was at AWS sales kickoff, and I was only 1 month into my time at AWS. I was an associate cloud developer, so pretty much as junior and as least tenured as you can get. And we were in Chicago in the middle of January, and there was a sea of people. So imagine 40,000 AWS Amazonians running around, and I didn't really know anyone. And I'm walking with one of my coworkers, and in this sea of people, I just see this flashing lights and sparkles. And I was like, man, who is that? And my coworker goes, oh, that's Hart Rossman. He's one of our top security leaders at AWS. He's pretty cool, and he always wears costumes. This year, his theme is...
This is like a regular...
This is his personality, actually. And so the theme this year was Farm Sparkle, so hence our outfits today.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool, because at most of these conferences, you see a lot of people in blazers, which is great, but I was like, it really makes him stick out and helps you understand his personality, and that he's probably a pretty approachable person. So let's move forward to a couple months later. I lived in New York City, so if you can imagine for a second, you're an associate cloud developer, still very new to AWS. I actually come from a non-traditional background, so I came from a healthcare management background and then moved into software engineering, but was still new to the cloud. And just imagine yourself in this tiny 500-square apartment. COVID's going on in New York City. You can hear ambulances pretty much 24/7. And I'm just working alone in my apartment, and I'm building out an AWS CloudFormation template. and I'm absolutely crushing it. I am writing this code to implement AWS config, where essentially what it's supposed to do is using tag resources. And so if the resource doesn't have the right tag, then it's non-compliant and the resource is essentially shut down. And so as I'm implementing this, I'm dealing with a little bit of imposter syndrome, but I had just gotten 3 of my AWS certifications, so I'm like, wow, I'm just really crushing this right now. And as I start to implement this, I'm working with the service team. We test it, we deploy it, everything's great. And then about 30 minutes later, I got a notification that something was broken. We've all been there, I think. So the good thing is that I knew that I needed to pull a SEC2 and alert people as soon as possible so that we could remediate it. But again, I wasn't in a security role. I was so nervous. I just kept thinking, wow, I'm definitely about to lose this job. It was nice working at Amazon while I was here. And so what I did was I pulled the SEC2, we hopped on a bridge call, and I didn't know what really was going to happen after the SEC2. So at Amazon, we say a lot, if you see something, say something. If you're not sure something is urgent, then it is. So I knew that I needed to escalate, but I wasn't really sure what was going to happen after. And I also wasn't sure what the culture was going to be in terms of how people were going to react to me, not only creating the SEC2, but actually creating it as well. And so what happened was we jumped on a bridge call. People are nervous. At Amazon, we care a lot about earning trust and making sure that we fix things immediately. I deeply care about earning trust and also not losing my job. So we get on the call, and Hart is actually the leader that gets pulled in. And I'm sitting there. I can actually feel it now, the jitters coming back. And Hart comes on, and I'm like, all right, it's been a great run these last 4 months. And Hart goes, Sarah, thank you so much for escalating. I really appreciate it. We're going to walk through this together and figure it out. And I just remember this sigh of relief of like, okay, wow, that's great, because I definitely wasn't sure how this was going to go. And on top of this, I also had a manager who her focus was not security. It was early in career. And she was super empowering, but I just didn't know what was going to happen next. And so with Hart, we were able to move forward and essentially work through this escalation and figure it out. And so something that I learned was that so normally with escalations, you might think that a VP is going to take it over and you won't be involved with it. But Hart was very intentional in making sure that I led the escalation from beginning to end. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. And how essentially we were able to not only remediate the problem, but actually learn from it and make things better within the service team as well.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your story,
Yeah.
Sarah. It was a super cool way to kind of get to know you actually being part of an escalation. You dropped the context of SEC2 a couple of times. And so at AWS, there are different severity levels for escalations. I'm sure many of you have something similar. For us, the default for something that you think might be security impacting would be a SEC2, and we've talked about that some in the past. The idea is that it's a very high level. It immediately pages senior leadership. It immediately brings the service teams and others that we can swarm on the issue and make sure, first of all, is it an issue or not? And then second of all, Sarah was talking about help the team that was involved in the issue lead a successful resolution. And so one of the things we like to do is have our leaders first start by thanking people, as Sarah mentioned. But the important part is to keep the ownership with that service team, right? Or the 2-pizza team that's involved in the midst of it, right? And so being relatively new to AWS, but also early career at the time, what was it like having to pull your team together around you to kind of move through this escalation?
Yeah, and so for more context too, so most of the people on this project were not security in their title roles. So a bunch of builders that essentially were working to help accelerate a migration. And so rallying the troops essentially, again, was helping to understand and take ownership that I did create a problem, but also making sure that everyone was on the same page of what's happened for next steps to align. So some of it also, because we work with people who are also in the sales side and the business side of the org, so helping them to understand what it meant for their role and responsibility, not just from a technical standpoint, so that they could better meet us halfway with aligning where we needed to go into the next project.
And what was it like kind of having that role reversal where one day, right, you were kind of an associate consultant, and then all of a sudden you find yourself actually leading your manager through something?
It was nerve-wracking, I would say, at first, but at the end it was super empowering because as I was going through this process, walking my manager through the security aspects and what happened next. And again, I was an associate cloud developer, so I actually wasn't in a security role, but because of this security event, it led me to dive into security, and that's now my specialty, which is really cool, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But my manager, Lisa, was amazing. I remember, I'll be very vulnerable, I was crying. I was like, I'm so sorry, everything's my fault. And she was like, we got this. We've all made mistakes before. And going through the process with her to help her better understand, then she actually was better empowered as well for other security events that could have happened in the future on a team.
Very cool, very cool.
And so I know, Hart, you've been around AWS for a while. And so how do you think about building security culture and distributing that throughout orgs?
Sure thing. You know, it's been a lot of fun sort of learning and growing with the security culture at AWS. There's a couple of things that really stick out for me. The first of which is that you've got to early on understand that security can't be effective if you're running it like projects and like programs. You really have to run it as operations, and you have to run it as a business. And when those two things come together, magic can happen. Often when we talk to customers and they're talking about some of the trials and tribulations they have, it comes back to trying to run security as a project or a program or a work stream, not as an operational imperative, not as a core function of the business. And so that's kind of a common element that's important. The second is being consistently persistent, right? This idea that, as Sarah and I were talking about, when you get on an operations call, security ops call, and the first thing you do is you thank the person who raised the issue, right? You can't just do that because you're in a good mood or because it's a Wednesday. You have to do that every time. And it feels repetitive, right? But it is, and that repetition creates that culture, and other people notice and say, oh, you know, you're thanking somebody for bringing this to light. I should thank people when they bring something to light. And so that consistent persistence, you're going to see that as a theme. And then the last thing is, you know, having a mental model on what creates a good culture. There's lots of good models out there that are academic, and there are books on it. I was asked a couple of years ago to think about my experience at Amazon, and I drew this little flywheel diagram here. And the basic idea is that there are three elements I've observed in our security culture. There's being a student, there's being a steward, and there's being a builder, right? And if you want to be a good steward of a culture, you have to constantly be a student of a culture, right? And the more you learn, the more you can share with others, the more you can experiment and pass along those best practices. And then as your stewardship grows, as you become more confident in that stewardship, you have an opportunity to become a builder, to try new things, and to take the culture in directions that weren't there when you got there. And so this student, steward, builder mental model has certainly helped me, and I think helped others on the team as well.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about that consistent persistence, one of the strongest elements that manifests that, certainly in our organization, is a weekly security business meeting, right? We've talked about this before. I think Steve Schmitz mentioned it once or twice on stage. I want to talk in a little bit more depth because it doesn't just happen at the most senior levels of the org. We have weekly security business meetings in a number of different orgs and a number of different times throughout the week. But the key is that you're not just talking about security when there's an escalation, and you're not just talking about it in the context of budget or a project milestone. You meet every single week to talk about how your security is growing, how it's thriving, where it needs some additional investment, where it needs some changes, right? Where it needs to be adapted. And so you're now having a minimum of 52 security conversations a year, right? And that's if nothing goes bump in the night. And that's if you don't start a new project or launch a new service, right? And so having it be a business-focused meeting, you're making decisions, you're allocating resources, you're looking at data in every meeting, is a powerful way to drive the culture and how we think about investing and improving the way we get things done. There's two things I want to share with you that have come out of that. One is, a couple of years ago, we were working through our weekly security meeting in the Global Services Organization, and we noticed, looking at a variety of data, that there was an opportunity to reduce the burden on our builders when it came to patching and managing security posture. And the simplest way to do that was having them retire infrastructure that they no longer needed. Maybe they had built a proof of concept or a demo. Maybe they were operating a system that had now been supplanted by something newer that we built, whatever it might be. And so we embarked on a campaign to shut down a lot of unneeded security, a lot of unneeded infrastructure for a security benefit, and we could watch some of our metrics go in the right direction. Well, fast forward a couple of years, and I get a call from finance, and they said, hey, we're looking to do some cost optimization, right? Just like everybody else working through the macroeconomics of the world we live in, and we want to know if you would be willing to be the executive sponsor. And I was like, look, I'm just some security nerd. I don't know anything about finance. And they said, well, we don't know anything about that, but you're really good at shutting down infrastructure, and we'd really like your help, right? So I explained to them what we do, the weekly security meeting, and how we organized it, and how we were really treating it as an operational metric rather than a project or a program. And they were like, we love it. You're on board, you're part of the team, you're gonna help us with this. And so it's one way that you can have a security objective and have a really profound impact on the business, whether you intended it or not, right? And then for me, it was a great, actually, lesson in being able to level up a little bit. I got a lot of great mentorship from some of my finance counterparts and learned quite a bit about their part of the world. And it was a really good opportunity, as we'll talk about a little later, to learn and grow and thrive in that way. The other thing we'll talk about is on-call handoffs. We're going to dive into that in a few more minutes, but the cool things in security tend to happen on the margins, on the edges. And so anytime you're transitioning from one operational cycle to another, or a system is coming up while a system is going down, right? Those transition points, you always learn super cool stuff. And so we'll talk about that on-call handoff, or sometimes we talk about it as the Ocho a little bit later. If you're gonna meet weekly about security, and it's gonna be a data-driven business conversation, inevitably, right, we're gonna have to talk to senior leadership.
Yep.
Might be because there was an escalation, and you're invited to come talk, or it might be because you're doing some really interesting things, and you're invited to come talk about progress to date and how you think about the different investments going forward, right? And so there's this idea of briefing the board that's becoming more popular in security circles, not just the actual board, where you might get an opportunity once a year or once a quarter, but really thinking about, if you're meeting weekly, can you have a weekly or a biweekly or even a monthly conversation with senior leadership, executive leadership? And what would you say if that door was open, right? There are two things that I've certainly discovered that carry the day. The first is the impact you're having on customers, right? I don't really care what business you're in. It could be a nonprofit, it could be in the public sector, it could be in a for-profit organization, right? If you can connect what you're doing in your security culture and the way you're running your security business to how you're benefiting the customer, leaders want to talk. They want to spend time exploring and learning from you and thinking about how they can provide more energy to that, right? The second thing is crisply discussing the business outcome. I've been in too many security conversations where the only mistake that's made is trying too hard to show how close to the details you are. And so you walk in and you're rattling off speeds and feeds from firewalls, and intrusion detection, and vulnerability management, and this, that, and the other thing. But you don't connect it to the outcome, right? To the benefit to the business. So if you start with, we were able to reduce the burden on our builders by X amount. We recovered this much developer time, and we lowered the cost of operating our infrastructure across the business by this amount. And we did it by focusing on improving our security posture, right? Now they're leaning in. Now they want to listen. Now they want to have that conversation, right? And so that working backwards from the customer, driving the business outcome into the conversation, and then giving them an opportunity to ask questions is going to win the day over showing up with a 50-minute conversation you're trying to jam into 5 minutes with some senior leader, right? But enough about board meetings. We want to talk about building inclusive security culture. We want to talk about the human element. And so Sarah's got a few things to kick us off in that direction.
Art. Appreciate it. So when it comes to the human element of security, something that's really interesting, and we're seeing trends, so mega trends in security, that more and more CISOs and security stakeholders are moving towards a human-centric security design of their programs. And the reason for that is as our technology and our defenses get stronger and more complex, adversaries are looking towards ways to use social engineering, aspects like that, through the human aspect. And as we know, technology can be somewhat predictable, humans not so much. And so this is where the human element really comes into how are you building out your program with human behavior in mind. And so there's some reports and essentially looking at how this can help reduce your risk. So you might be asking yourself, well, why would I want to empower my builders to better understand security and the human element of behavior? Well, in these reports, they're saying that by increasing your employee engagement, you're not only lowering your risk of insider threat, but also increasing your security awareness. I'm sure we've all gone through one of those trainings that's mandatory, and you've just clicked like right through, and you're like, great, I completed that. And we're starting to see more human-centric models where it's actually appealing to our employees about how can we empower them. And so a big aspect of this is how are we making sure that our builders are having a security-first mindset? And some of the different aspects of this is acknowledging that there's a lot of complexity. So we're all people outside of our jobs, and while we might be going through a security event, we also might be going through something at home. And you want to acknowledge that, especially as a leader. So again, having that empathetic leadership. And again, being able to balance innovation and security. We'll talk about this a little bit more, how you can better do that. But essentially, when you're looking at what products you're wanting to create and ship out, how can you better shift that left to be more secure and think about security a lot earlier, which will not only get back builder hours, but reduce burnout from all of your different builders as well. And then something that I think's really great that we do here at AWS is showcasing how an individual's contribution can impact the overall security posture in your organization. And so that's going to be things like recognizing your builders. So going back to my story, I did win an award. It's a photo of a dumpster fire, but it says CEO or COE owner. So our COE process is correction of errors. So I was the correction of errors owner, and I won that award. But it was a great way to show that we can have some fun with it, and that our team's here to help us through and learn from the process and also make it better.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, you know, one of the things is we're leaning into psychological safety. You know, if you're the security leader on the call, or even if you're not, right, you kind of have to be the calmest person in the room, right? One of the things that will often happen is people come in with all these things going on in their mind, these fears, these assumptions, these expectations, right? Mm-hmm. And it's all around the whole room, and you just have to kind of remind people, like, hey, you know, this has CEO level visibility. Of course it does. It's a security thing, and it's important. You know, we have to act right now. Of course we do. This is urgent, right? And then you kind of ground everybody, right? And just let everybody know that like, this is a safe space. It's a super serious space, but it's a safe space. And the number one thing we have to do is figure out the next right step to help, right? And if you can do that for folks, it doesn't make it perfect. There can still be a lot of things going on in their brain space, but it makes it a lot easier to focus on the next right thing and the next and the next and the next. Mm-hmm. And then soon enough, you actually do have a psychologically safe environment that's moving at blistering speed to resolve the issue.
Yeah, and when it comes to that foundational safety, it's going to help amplify and empower your builders, because after my experience, I was able to feel more empowered to go to Hart or any other security leader when there was any type of event going on. And so when you're thinking about your culture, the foundation and the key building block is going to be psychological safety. We have been briefed to remind everyone that we are not licensed psychiatrists, so take that in mind. But here is the definition of psychological safety if you're not familiar. So it is the shared belief that within a team or an organization that one can speak up, take risk, and express ideas or concerns without facing retaliation or judgment. So I'm sure some of you have heard the term psychological safety, but really if you read that definition without psychological safety in it, you might think, yeah, that's the type of security organization I want. I want people to amplify ideas about how we can think big and be better for our customers. And I also want people to feel like they can come to me with concerns without any fear of retaliation. And so really this is what you're going to be aiming for. And so when you're thinking about psychological safety, a big part of it is going to be starting with leading with empathy and humility. So I have a team of 24 builders that I led in the Southeast. And anytime that they had any type of security event or were working on something with their customers, I would always start off by echoing what Hart did for me and saying thank you, and also saying I support you, I'm here for you, and I will be walking through the security event with you the whole way there. So I know we're all people outside of work, but I'm here to take things on if you need to hop off and you need a minute. And so being able to promote that shared sense of responsibility and pulling in different stakeholders from all different parts of the business. So kind of like what Hart was talking about, where you might have finance people on the call, you might have legal, you might have different sales people. And how can you help understand them, help understand the different business outcomes of what's going to be best for the customer and how we can all work together, but also calmly de-escalate in the sense of making sure that we all know we're on one team. And one of the different aspects too, and we'll talk about this a little bit, I had to learn that something that's a really empowering aspect is making sure that there's open communication regardless of seniority. So something that Hart challenged me to do, and we can talk about this a little more, was I was working with the service team about the security event, and there were some aspects where we could improve the service. And so the VP of the service was involved.
Yeah, and so Sarah and I had this conversation. You want to give people opportunities, as she was saying, to have some off-ramps, right? Like it's great to be a deep owner, it's great to learn and grow, but sometimes you need some help, or sometimes you just need a break from the action. And so when it came time to have this conversation with the service team VP, we kind of had a separate one-on-one about it. Said, hey, look, everybody else kind of, aside. I know you can do it. I think it's a huge opportunity, but it's a very different conversation. It's a very different aspect of leadership than you had been executing. And I wanted to give you first right of refusal, right, to give it a go. But also know that if you're not up to it in the moment, it's not that you're not up to it ever. Just in that moment, maybe that's not right for you. And we had a good conversation. And thankfully, you were game on. Right?
Yes, and I will say, I remember my eyes being so wide open saying, you want me, an associate cloud developer who's 4 months in to go give feedback to a VP of a product team? But again, Hart walked me through it, helped me feel empowered, and it was actually a great conversation that I had with the VP. And something that I realized, and ways that you can empower your builders as well, is that there's different levels of expertise. So he had 25 plus years of expertise in infrastructure, but I had my expertise in terms of actually going into the tool, building it, and seeing where there could be improvements, especially for our customers as well. And he was super gracious and listened to my feedback. We talked about different ways to improve for the customer. And something that was super cool after this is I actually was invited to their offsite for their next year planning afterwards because they felt like it was a really collaborative relationship where we could talk about how my experience as a builder could help them better improve their product. So that was something that was really cool and helps to build foundational security. But when we think about building sustainable security, so what does that mean? That's essentially looking at how can we make sure that our builders aren't burning out and that they feel empowered and that their voices are being heard. So this is a flywheel that I created as part of our ID&E efforts, so inclusion, diversity, and equity. And something that a lot of people have experienced, probably regardless of if you're underrepresented or not, is sometimes being spoken over in a meeting, or you mention this really great idea, no one comments on it, and then the next thing someone says, hey, I have an idea, and it was yours. And you're sitting there thinking, that's weird, I thought I just said that. And so this is a flywheel to help empower leaders and allies for how they can better amplify different people's ideas. So how it works is essentially I can say, hey, Hart, I have this really cool idea where we're going to use Gen AI to do X, Y, and Z. And Hart in this meeting would say, that's a really interesting idea, Sarah. And so by him calling it out and giving credit back to me, he's helping the room pause to realize what I just said, and they will then acknowledge my contribution, and we can discuss whether it's actually a good idea or not, and dive into that. But then after that, it makes me feel like I've been included and my voice has been heard, therefore creating a more equitable workplace where I'm going to be more likely to engage and also think of more big ideas to help better improve outcomes for our customers. So let's pivot this a little bit and think about how can this relate to security specifically. And again, you can use that other wheel, obviously for security, but this is looking at how are we going to use positive reinforcement for escalations. So the same way that you want to make sure that people feel heard and supported, you're going to acknowledge that, so let's say I've escalated an issue, and I've pulled that SEV2 like we've talked about, so that then that's pulling in all of the different leaders. And like we talked about, Hart comes into the meeting and says, thank you so much for escalating. It's immediately going to de-escalate a lot of the emotions in the room. There might be some fear, uncertainty, and doubt floating around, and we want to make sure that we're avoiding that and making sure that we're not shooting the messenger, so the person that escalated feels like they were essentially praised for escalating that. And that will help other people to stop and acknowledge and say, yes, Sarah did the right thing by escalating, and now we're all going to figure this out as one team so that we can move forward and make this better. So again, now after that security event, it has made me way more likely to escalate any types of ideas or security issues that I've seen in projects that I'm not even working in. And it's helped to improve different aspects for the service teams, and also I've cascaded that down to my builders that I managed by helping them to better understand that they can always raise concerns at any time. And even if it turns out to not be an issue, that's okay. At least we looked into it and we can move forward from it.
And it works both ways, right?
Yeah.
So when you think about the flywheel that Sarah just presented, right, as a leader in the organization, right, it's incumbent upon you to be inclusive and be equitable. And that means not only doing your best to create space and raise up other voices and perspectives, because when you think about incident response, whether it's on the IT side or security or whatever, so much of it is based on playbooks, right? So that covers the things you know about. What it doesn't adequately cover in many cases is what you don't know about something new. And so when you have a new situation, do you only want the voices and experience of the people who have only seen the same things over and over again? You need their voice and mix, obviously, but you also want those new perspectives, those new voices, right? To help us reduce the ambiguity, to give us alternatives and options to consider, and then to drive that forward. And so if it could be covered by the playbook, that's great. If it can't, you want all the best ideas on how we're going to resolve this as quickly as possible. The other element of it is as a leader, right, owning some of the outcome, right? You don't want to step on other people's toes, but in my opinion, it's just my opinion, but I've seen this happen across Amazon very, very often. Leaders don't get off calls without taking an action themselves, without owning an outcome. So instead of saying, hey, everybody's got a job, thanks everybody, I'm going back to sleep, it's, hey, everybody's got their role to play, and here are the actions I'm taking as a leader before we get off this call, so that I'm working the problem, I'm working the issue, I'm developing opportunities as well. And so part of that equity also means including yourself in the work profile, making sure you roll up your sleeves and go get stuff done with the team. And I think it's an underappreciated aspect of inclusion and equity. It's both the underrepresented, but it's also making sure everybody, including the person who thinks they might be in charge of that moment, has a role to play and has a job to do.
And I will say that helps earn a lot of trust too from the builder level when they see leaders coming in and taking action items and being able to dive deeply into the aspects, because it reminds the builders, again, of that shared responsibility, and that security is everyone's top priority, and it's not just at the builder level, it's everyone, including leaders like Hart, to help build that, again, foundational safety as well. So when it comes to reducing burnout, that's another aspect of your security culture that's going to have to work to make it more sustainable. So we know that after COVID, a lot of people are feeling more and more burnt out. There's more security events happening in different aspects of the world, and so people are feeling like they're burnt out when it comes to how are they scaling their champion security builders. So there's different aspects that we've talked about, and something that we try and do, because we have a global team, is having time-friendly meetings. So not everyone's going to live in Seattle. We have folks in Singapore, we have folks in Sydney, in the EMEA area, and making sure that we're looking at different areas. And then also following the sun. So Hart will talk a little bit about the Ocho model and the on-haul handoff.
Yeah. In addition, when I talk about reducing burnout, right? Oftentimes, people who are passionate about security are helpers, right? It's pretty often that if you take a survey of the room, let's say, how many people here have been teachers or are teachers in some regard? How many people maybe have been law enforcement or military? How many people have maybe been EMTs or firefighters? You get a lot of people who maybe not in their day job or maybe in a previous career were helpers. And one of the challenges that sometimes presents is that they don't ever want to go off duty. So if they're on call for 6 hours or 8 hours, they go off call, but then they're still in there updating tickets and they're still chasing this, ghost in the machine or whatever it might be. And you really have to help people understand that your watch is done, you did an awesome job. That's over for the moment. But what we do find is people still want to build. And so what we see a lot of times certainly in AWS is that those folks who are coming off security on call, now can transition to maybe building a tool or a service or working on a talk for reinvent or reinforce, right? Or something that kind of keeps them scrappy, keeps them part of it, but gives them some relief, gets them off the clock, as it were. And so offering constructive alternatives, right, can sometimes be very helpful for those people in the community who are really passionate about being engaged.
And we even talked about too, about in security culture, obviously a lot of people are virtual, so we even have a security memes channel that's just funny, different memes going back and forth. And Hart was like, we have a healthy security culture when all the memes are flying around. So
absolutely,
even
right.
Fun things like that as well.
Yeah, right. All that stuff from the outside needs to come in at some level, and so strong meme game shows you've got real good cyber riz, right? And so now we get to kind of the Ocho, right, the on-call handoff. And it's a particular mechanism that I think many of you probably have. We have it too. And it's exciting because it's what happens on the margin during a transition, right? And so there are three kind of things that I've noticed about Ocho which are really powerful. The first is it's super data-driven. There's a very simple user experience for the previous shift, the next shift, and the escalation leads. All the data is there, right? Everything you need to know to be effective in the next shift. And if there are unknowns, they're identified so that they can become knowns, right? The second thing is that you have an opportunity to evaluate priority, right? Every shift is a new opportunity to think about the priority, to think about the resources needed, and again, thinking about it both as an operation and as a business. Are we investing in the right areas of our on-call and our response? What's working, what's not working, right? And then the third thing that I think is really powerful is it every 6 to 8 hours gives you as a leader an opportunity to inspect collaboratively. You can ask questions, you can take time to slow things down for a moment and understand what happened here, what happened there. Give an opportunity for everybody else involved in the on-call handoff to do the same. And so when you do it openly in a transparent manner, everybody who needs to be in the know has the data, can inspect, and can ask important questions to drive even greater success in the next operational period. And so it's a simple thing. Again, I think many of you do it, perhaps not all of you. But putting extra attention on a successful Ocho can really make that security culture sing, right? It's those things that happen at the margins. When we talk about building an escalation-friendly culture, I think a lot of organizations, a lot of customers I talk to, focus on what has happened, right? And it's natural. At AWS, we do that too. Sarah earlier mentioned the COE, the correction of errors, which is it's a root cause analysis. And we took from other companies and cultures this idea of the 5 whys. So you ask why something happened as many times as is necessary till you get to the bottom of it, right?
I think mine had 20 whys.
Yours might have had at least 20 whys, right? After watching that go on in Amazon for a number of years, I thought, what's the complement to the 5 whys, right? How do we get in front of this and develop a similar mechanism that helps us understand what has to be put in place ahead of time to prevent the need to do a root cause analysis in the future? And so I was talking with some folks at work, and we came up with this idea of the 5 hows. So when somebody comes to you and says, I have this brilliant idea to build a new service or to offer this thing to customers, you say, great, how are you going to do that? And they start to tell you and say, great, how are you going to do that? And how are you going to do that? And how are you going to do that? And you ask how as many times as is necessary until you deeply understand the security plan, its implications, and how they'll operate it. And then everybody goes, great, that's how we're going to do it. Go execute, right? And so we found that it's been a pretty effective way of helping build an escalation-friendly security culture by adding a mechanism in the upfront. It says not just how do we evaluate when things go bump in the night, but how do we prevent things from going bump in the night in the first place? And when you dovetail that with a common element like doing threat models at the beginning of every build, and then partnering with your AppSec team, right, to make sure that what you've built aligns with your threat model and that the overall way you're going to implement and operate that is in the confines of this 5 hows model, right? You really get this powerful way of reinforcing so many of the things Sarah and I have talked about throughout the presentation today with just a couple of simple mental models, right, that are easy to adopt and easy to scale. And so if you're currently doing root cause analysis, if you're doing something like the 5 whys, definitely encourage you to try the 5 hows, right? Make sure people have a solid security plan that's deeply understood. It's relatively easy to execute. It really does pay big dividends later if something does go bump in the night. Right. We're in the home stretch here.
Home stretch, yeah. So we've talked about embedding security into the business, building that foundational model of psychological safety. And so now how are you going to use that to empower your builders to be security champions? And so something that's really interesting that I'm sure a lot of us have heard the number that there's 3.5 million open cybersecurity roles, and each year it's increasing 26%. And so that's going to pose a challenge for a lot of you when it comes to how do you hire security engineers, security architects. And the way that you can essentially scale out your security is by following some of these mega trends that we're going to talk about. And one of those is the AWS Security Guardians. So this is a really cool program. We have about 2,000 builders, so they're not security roles specifically, but they are security-minded individuals who have seen that they are ready to champion security and shift it left into the products that they're deploying. And so essentially how this works is with partnership with our application security team, we have security champions that are in all of the different product teams. And this is a way that we empower different builders to understand how to implement security. And so what we do for this is we train them, and part of the big aspect of this to scale out our security is they will do threat modeling. So they're actually one of the builders building out this product, so it makes it a lot easier to understand deeply the product. And so they do the first initial threat model and then partner with the AppSec team to look at the threat model and where there should be some remediations. And this is going to save a ton of builder hours and, again, help reduce the burnout, because it's never fun when you've built a product and then you go talk to a team that you need to go implement something and then you have to start all over again. We don't want to do that. So this is to help teams ship faster and more securely. And something that we've seen that, again, tracking these metrics are really key and important, but this has been super effective for us internally. So we've seen fewer medium and high priority findings because of these security champions within the product teams, so at 22.5%. And then we've also seen that there's faster reviews with these guardians because, again, these are builders or software developer engineers that are actually on the product team, so they already understand what the product roadmap is, what the specs were for building out the product, so it's going to be easier for them to understand what the potential vulnerabilities and building out that threat model. And again, it's also helping to build that trust between the security team. So instead of being the people of no, we're the people of, if anyone does improv, yes and. So back to the how of, yes, that's great, and how are we going to implement this securely? And having these people in those teams. So it's gonna help to scale out your security and, again, ship these a lot faster. And just in perspective, so this is over 200,000 days saved per year at AWS. So it saves us a lot of time, and again, it's helping our builders to better understand and empower them to implement security and make sure that it's the top priority. So the Security Guardians is a program that we have at AWS, but we've seen other organizations start to use this model and implement on their own, and they've gamified it. They have different charts of who's winning the most points, of the most threat modeling they've done, and the most remediations. And so again, it's a way to recognize those builders, and even though it might seem small, the different contributions they've had, how it overall impacts to the larger number of the organization. And then in addition, I'll pass it to Hart, but by helping these builders to implement different technical controls, you'll be able to, again, ship faster as well.
Yeah, and just to build on that, I've talked to a lot of customers who said, we've started a program like this, maybe we called it a security guild or an AppSec guild or whatever it might be, but it fizzled out over time, right? And the topic for today's talk is sustainable security culture. And one of the things that was implicit in what Sarah was just saying, but I want to just kind of call it out a little bit, is that the Security Guardian program at AWS is built on top of closed loop mechanisms, right? So that's more powerful than a process. You'll hear Amazonians talk about mechanisms. Quite often it's where you've got a controllable input, you do something to that input to get an output that you can evaluate, and then you've got a feedback loop that allows you to either change the controllable input or make changes to whatever operation you perform on that input, right? And so it's something that you manage, you operate, right? You manipulate over time. to continually improve the output that you're getting. Or there's automation, right? We've got tooling. And so when you've got strong mechanisms, when you've got strong tooling, and then you add the guardians on top of that and give them access to the mechanisms and tooling, right? It not only earns the trust of the AppSec teams, right? But the AppSec teams get even greater trust in the guardians, right? And it becomes this really self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're just trying to start a guardian program without existing mechanisms and existing tooling they can leverage, it's a little bit more of a glee club, right? Which is a lot of fun, but hard to maintain over time, right? And so, anyway, just awesome stuff there. Thanks for highlighting that. The other megatrend we want to talk about, and there are lots of megatrends we could be talking about, but another one is this idea of zero trust, right? This could really be a game changer for your organization. AWS is doing a lot of cool stuff here. We just announced yesterday some improvements to IAM Access Analyzer, some great new features that not only allow you to do even more fine-grained access control, but allow you to do custom scope and custom evaluation. So you can really customize, I said custom a lot there, didn't I? You can really tailor the way Analyzer evaluates your IAM policies programmatically and use automated reasoning and machine learning, right, to get faster, better response around least privilege, around changes to policy, and so that you can manage them in your CI/CD pipelines in a much more effective way. We've also, if you've not heard, released an open source identity policy language called Cedar, which is phenomenal. Works with AWS, but you can also build it into any application that you have, right? And so you can really have zero trust start to permeate everything you do, right? And develop an access model that works best for your organization, for your application. And then we've got a verified family of services now, verified permissions, verified access, which takes all that together and manages a bunch of that for you. So it's all super cool stuff. But if you're not paying attention to zero trust, and again, tying it back to that security culture, right? Identity and access is what's going to drive a lot of the behavior in your security culture over time programmatically. And so taking an opportunity to literally level up and rethink your identity and your access strategy is going to be a game changer for you if you take the opportunity, if you take the advantage. We also talk around this idea of building the culture, right? We talked about modeling the culture in a number of examples Sarah and I gave. But it's not all just modeling. We actually have classes at AWS where we teach managers how to be part of an escalation. There was actually a point in time several years ago where I had about 3,500 managers take escalation training. Many of them said, I've been in my job 30 years, worked a lot of, I've never had to learn how to do an escalation. I've never even been part of an escalation. And we thought, great, then you're going to love this because you're going to learn a lot of new skills. You're going to get an update to how you think about these things, maybe a little bit of an attitude adjustment, make you happier and more smiley. And in the unfortunate event that you have something go bump in the night and you have to respond, you know exactly what you need to do as a manager, right? It's many of the things that we talked about today. So we have formal escalation manager training for anybody. It's not for security leaders. It's not for security managers. We also have training for mentors, right? One of the things we've definitely learned is that people who have been part of a community for a long time often like to step into a mentorship role. And that works great for some people, but not for all people. Mentorship is a skill. I can tell you I have learned a ton about mentorship from Sarah. Reverse mentorship or not, I don't know what we want to call it, but she has taught me a lot about leading empathetically and inclusively and how to engage and land ideas with others. I tend to kind of come in a little hot at times, not mad or angry, just we got to do it right now. And it's like, slow down, start with where you're coming. How was your day? How was Thanksgiving, right? What's going on in your life? And then kind of ease into these things. And so taking the time to be trained as a mentor is super valuable. can be informal training, but we also have some classes that we really encourage people to take. And then the other element of the trainer that's really, I think, beneficial is finding something to work on together. And I think at sort of the heart of the story of how Sarah and I got to start working together was that there was a reason to develop a mentor-mentee relationship, a reverse mentor, reverse mentee relationship. It wasn't just we got picked our names out of a hat and put together, right? And so looking for those opportunities to take the training, to take the preparation, and apply it on something meaningful together often goes a long way towards creating a mentor relationship that has legs, right?
And I think too, when it comes to building those mentorships, again, like Hart said, since we kind of fell into that security event, it made it more authentic. We better understood where we were coming from, and we could see how the humility helped us to better understand skill sets and where we were going. And then also, we will call it reverse mentoring because that's the name of my slide. But reverse mentoring is also a megatrend that I think personally is really cool. And the thought behind it is that anyone can be an expert and mentor based on their expertise. So if you're a VP, you can still, benefit from mentorship. And so how this program works with us is it actually pairs up people that are builders with different VPs and different aspects of our organization. And so I actually got paired up with one of our executives who was the East Coast sales leader. And it was really cool because he kept asking, I get security, but it seems like it's blocking me. It kind of seems like it might delay some of my deals. Can you help me understand it? And so we would actually meet in person over coffee and just talk about some of the different security mechanisms and how we could better shift left so that we were better helping his team to understand security and align on better outcomes for the customer. And so I thought that was really cool because he, again, wasn't a security executive, but he was really interested in learning how he could do better. And thus, it created this great reverse mentor relationship where I got to better understand his business and what they were trying to do with implementing their goals throughout the year and how I, as a security professional, could be help to him and help him champion and essentially put that throughout his org as well. So to summarize it up for everyone, again, your call to action. So some of the different aspects. So making sure that security is a weekly business meeting and you're not just meeting with different leaders when there's a security event. It's going to help people to better understand what you're working on, get people excited about security and some of your think big ideas. And then also amplifying ideas and concerns by thanking people when they escalate. So making sure that you're building that foundation of psychological safety, being vulnerable, and checking in with people and asking how they're doing before you dive in. And again, that positive reinforcement of escalation so that people feel like they're able to be heard and creating a more equitable environment. And then lastly, scaling out your security through mentorship and taking builders who might not necessarily know anything about security and coaching them and mentoring them through the process so that they can better help your product teams ship more securely and quickly. And so if you love security and Philly cheesesteaks, I do want to let you know to save the date. So Reinforce is going to be in June in Philadelphia from the 10th to the 12th. And if you're not familiar with Reinforce, it is security focused. So imagine reInvent, but everything's about security and way more farm sparkle. So we would love to see you there. And then here's some QR codes for you and your team. So these are free resources where you can learn more about cloud. There's actually a security path that's pretty cool. So you can look at if you're a security professional or if you're, again, just a champion that's wanting to go in and make sure that security is implemented in your teams. These are some great resources that you can use. So the skill builder is essentially in the console working to actually build out proof of concept. There's some cool gamifying it. And then if you want to understand more of the theory, then there's the AWS certifications. So thank you so much. We really appreciate your time, and hope you have a great rest of your reInvent.
If you've got any questions, we're happy to take them outside afterwards.
Thank you. And we'll take any questions outside.